Hi, this is Bill Milford, and I'm here to give you a quick lecture on solution-focused thinking, which is a great strategy that people use in therapy, they use in education, and I just think it's a great way to think about things in life. And one of the things is that it just gets your attention because it's a new way of looking at things. So if I was to present myself in a different way, that would get your attention. So what we're going to try to do is look at therapy in a new way that gives us a different kind of focus for what we want to do with folks. So in order to do this, I want to take a look at three things. And one is to take a look at how the solution-focused approach evolved, then look at the characteristics of solution-focused work, and then to give you an example of how solution-focused thought might be used in a given situation. So right now, for therapists, for teachers, for students, for everybody, we have a crunch of time. People get worried about money. They get worried about just all of the things that are involved in doing almost anything, paying for a service. So with regard to therapy or regard to getting outcomes with clients, we want things that are very efficient. So for teachers or therapists or anybody even in the business world, you want to do things in the most efficient and effective process possible because it's all about outcome. It's all about achieving a certain goal or behavior for a client and feeling like you can do that on a consistent and successful basis. So when you think of outcomes, again, it's this whole idea of us having good intentions versus good outcomes. So especially with a doctor, you don't want a doctor to say, oh boy, I tried the best I could. You'd like them to say, boy, the client is doing great because of what I did for them. So when we look at the evolution of counseling, it's been a time of good intentions, but not always of great outcomes. And it started, very much helper-based, and that is philanthropists, rich folks giving money in order to help out the poor. And then we tried to integrate a little science into it. And this is when we had Mesmer and Charcot and people using hypnotism in order to change people's behaviors. And that was the idea, well, maybe mental health illness is just something that can be trance-induced and changed from folks. And then you got Freud, who started to look at what he thought were underlying processes of what goes on in our unconscious desires of the id, the ego, and the superego. And Freud brought about this idea of, well, maybe we can do things through talking therapies, that by talking with people, we'll be able to find out some of these things that are going on and therefore be able to help provide some repair. Well, if you keep looking at a swing in how people look at things, we go from one end to the other end. So the other end was the idea of behaviorism. And this guy here is B.F. Skinner, who was the founder of pure behaviorism. And he said, well, I can determine anything that anybody thinks and does just by controlling the reinforcements that they get in life. If we reinforce somebody enough in a certain direction, I can turn them into a serial killer or I can turn them into a doctor. So this had a very dry way of looking at human behavior, and it put people in the position of constantly providing rewards or punishments for somebody. And it didn't seem to always get the best outcomes going that they could find. So then, and here's some of the examples of that, is that people are driven by different kinds of fears and passions and things that they want to do. And we have a natural inclination towards them. But then you swing towards the other end and you find this guy named Aaron Beck, and he was looking at what cognitive theory would do. He said, it's not reinforcements, it's how we think about things that determines our behavior. So Beck was very much into trying to figure out, well, how do people think about things and how do we change how we think about things? And actually the strongest theoretical concept right now is CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, of sort of a mixture of both behaviorisms and cognitive theory in order to help people change how they think about things. This guy here is Abraham Maslow, and he came up with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And what he was trying to do was figure out, well, what is it if we're not to look at Freud's drives as being sort of pathological, this id, ego, and superego, desire for lust and desire for control and desire for balance, said, well, I think there's a much more positive way to look at things, that we're looking to become full, integrated human beings in life. But in order to do that, we have to have basic needs met on various kinds of levels. So then we got this humanistic way of looking at therapy, how to help people become whole. And, his desire was that if you connected with yourself and with others, then you could have really good outcomes and that you feel fulfilled. And so social work actually takes on a lot of these aspects, which is that our knowledge of the client, their knowledge of their strengths and their stressors, all gives us information as to who people can be and what their potentials are. But social work has always had the pressure on it that we need to get results and get results quick. So we focused on doing task-centered work with clients, which is to make sure specifically between now and the next time we see them, we're making incremental progress in the right direction. And there are lots of ways that you can do that. There are lots of ways to help people change. But that's our ultimate goal, is helping people to change their thoughts, their behavior, and ultimately how they feel about things. Well, when you look at actually the outcome of this kind of work, you can see that people improve in about 6 months from depression by doing all of these things: psychoanalytic therapy, behavioral therapy, cognitive therapy, exercising, or just doing nothing. That is, sometimes just doing nothing will help you get better. Why is that? Well, because usually in 6 months our life changes a little bit so that we get a new focus and a new way of looking at things. But there's been an approach that the various therapists have used that seem to have better outcomes, and clients enjoy the engagement process more. And these were founded by therapists like Milton Erickson, who was a hypnotist, actually, Virginia Satir, who was into working with couples and families, and Salvador Minuchin, who did a lot of family and systems theory work, and then Bandler and Grinder, who put together this concept called neurolinguistic programming. And the outcomes of this work were just as effective as these other approaches, and therapists claim a much more enjoyable process of working with folks. So Steve DeShazer and Insoo Berg helped to put together this solution-focused approach. And their way of thinking about things is that our work as social workers and helping folks is not to focus in on who somebody was, but who they're becoming, and to try to make what they want to be more compelling than what they didn't like in their past. So in this way, we emphasize solutions and we de-emphasize problems. We're trying to carefully focus in on what we want to achieve with a client, and we're less focused in on their history, because all of the problems in the past were contextual. That is, they happened because of a variety of different circumstances. Now we're trying to stay singularly focused to help clients achieve goals, and we're looking at exploring what are the barriers to them getting the goals in the here and now, and what can we do for their future in order to help them achieve success. So while traditional approaches are looking backwards, like why and what were the causes of our problems, when we look at solution-focused works, we're looking ahead. So instead of being depressed, we're asking, well, how would you like to feel? When you feel that way, what do you do, and what are the characteristics of those situations? And when those situations occur, how can you make them happen more often? What are the characteristics when things go well, and how can you make those characteristics happen? And then there's this idea of a miracle question, which says, and the miracle question says, if you wake up tomorrow and your problem was solved, how would you know that? How would you figure that out? What would be the signs? And then you try to start and make those things happen so that clients can get the sign that they're moving in with momentum in the right direction. And solution-focused work uses scaling quite a bit, which is to try to rate on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about things? Because with scaling, you can see over time whether you're moving in the right direction or the wrong direction. So when we used these strategies, we're trying to create momentum moving forward, and we're not trying to focus on the backward pieces, because solution-focused stuff actually thinks that our problems, like the depression that we might have, are really crappy solutions to the real problems in our lives. That how we feel tend to be our way of resolving other kinds of problems, and what we want to do is be able to move on that to a desired outcome that we want to achieve. So one of the ways that we do that is we look for exceptions. That is, when in the past has the problem not been there, and how can we recreate those times? That we want to create solutions that actually make people do stuff. Because when you do things, and things are behavioral, it will cause feelings. And whereas feelings can cause behaviors too, because if you feel depressed, you don't want to get up and move. But if you get up and move, if you do that behavior, then you might be able to start to feel, well, I feel a little more energized right now. I feel like, yeah, there's some hope. I should keep doing this a little bit more. So homework is the key. Doing things in small incremental steps, that Kaizen concept that we've talked about often, is so important with all this. And that miracle question is one way of us taking a look at what are going to be the first signs of us being successful in how we do things. So when we try to create momentum, we compliment the client and catch them doing things right so they can feel like they are actually getting and building progress that'll keep them going and sustaining them. And if you may have heard of the concept of motivational interviewing, that comes about using all of these concepts together, and by using questions in motivational interviewing, we sort of guide a client towards a designated outcome. So I'd really encourage you to read more about motivational interviewing when you get the chance. If we were to experiment with solution-focused work, we would start with scaling, and I'm not going to go through all of this in detail right here, but you can go back and stop and pause the video and let the so you can read this and pause the video to get more details about all of this process. But here you can see that this uses scaling. It takes a look at what were the characteristics of a given time, and that we're trying to look at how we can project forward and how could you make a plan forward that would help you deal with these issues in order for you to feel like you were making progress in the right direction. So being client-centered and solution-focused means that we meet people where they're at and we find out where they want to go. So rather than focusing in on problems, what we want to know is that instead of the problem, what do you want? And then enhance their motivation towards that change. Explore the barriers, the ambivalence, and strengthen their commitment to change. And use your paraphrasing skills, your summary skills, to help the client see where they can go with things. So I understand that you felt depressed and you want to move forward by being more active and exercising, and you feel like right now the ability to walk around the block is possible for you once a day, so let's make that our goal. And then you'd scale, how does it feel to have done that? The good thing about solution-focused work is that it tends to be a place where you're focusing on what people want to achieve, and therefore it creates a lot of energy around it, where sometimes just talking about the places where people are stuck make both the client feel worse and the social worker to feel less hopeful for them. In this particular approach, we're using these same social work skills towards a desired outcome in the future that gets both the client and the social worker energized in the process. That's all for now.